The morning of the drill arrived with alarm bells that echoed through every corridor of Nexus Station 7. Taeyang woke up before the alarm, his heart already racing. He had barely slept. Now he sat on the edge of his bunk, taking slow breaths and trying to calm his mind. He put on his security uniform and checked his equipment. The tracking device was attached to his belt. It would let the control room see exactly where he was at all times. Commander Hana Kim had insisted on it. She had also given him a small emergency beacon. One press and the security team would come running. In the hallway he passed other humans heading to the safe zones. They looked at him with worry. One woman, a maintenance worker named Jiwoo, stopped him. She asked if he was really going through with this. When he nodded, she wished him luck. Her voice said she thought he would need it. The control room was crowded when Taeyang arrived. Large screens covered the walls, showing views from cameras all over the station. Commander Hana Kim stood in the center, coordinating the drill. Thexlar was beside her, watching his control panel where he could track the Kravax predators. Commander Brektos had positioned himself near the best viewing screen, clearly expecting entertainment. Also present was Vera, a Polarian scientist with bright blue feathers and sharp eyes. Her species looked like birds but stood as tall as humans. She was known throughout the station for her research on animal behavior. She had brought recording equipment and was setting up multiple data streams. When she noticed Taeyang, she gave him a respectful nod. At least someone seemed interested in this as science rather than a show. Commander Hana Kim pulled Taeyang aside. She spoke quietly, her voice firm. She told him he did not have to do this. There was no shame in going to a safe zone. He thanked her but said he wanted to continue. She studied his face for a moment, then squeezed his shoulder. She told him to trust his instincts. Minho Lee was already in position near the camera controls. He had arranged for extra coverage of Corridor Theta 7, where Taeyang would be stationed. The young engineer gave him a thumbs up and a nervous smile. At exactly 0900 hours, the drill began. Warning sirens howled through the station. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Automated announcements told everyone to proceed to designated safe zones immediately. This was not a test. This was not a test. Taeyang walked to Corridor Theta 7 and took his position near the middle. The corridor was long and straight, with white walls and a floor that reflected the emergency lights. Doors lined both sides, but they had all sealed automatically when the drill started. He was alone. Through the cameras, he could see other parts of the station. Different species were evacuating in their own ways. The Polarians used their wings to lift themselves to high vents and crawl spaces. The Kravax adults deployed energy barriers from their armor. The crustacean species simply pulled into their thick shells and became nearly immovable. Everyone had natural defenses. Everyone except humans. In the control room, Thexlar activated the release mechanism. On the screen, 6 doors opened in the lower levels. 6 juvenile Kravax predators emerged. Even through the camera, Taeyang could see how they moved. Smooth and fast, alert and focused. Their dark fur rippled over muscles built for hunting. Their eyes scanned everything. The predators split up at first, exploring different corridors. They moved like a coordinated team, checking corners and doorways. Their training was obvious. They knew what they were doing. Taeyang could hear them before he saw them. The soft click of claws on metal floors, a low chirping sound they made to communicate with each other. His heart hammered in his chest. Every instinct told him to run, to hide, to do anything except stand here waiting, but he had made his choice. He forced himself to breathe slowly. He relaxed his shoulders and kept his hands at his sides, open and visible. He thought about all the dangerous animals he had worked with on Earth. Brown bears who could kill with one swipe, wolves who hunted in packs, big cats who moved like shadows. He had survived all of them by staying calm. 3 of the predators rounded the corner. They saw him immediately and froze. For a moment, everything was still. Taeyang could see them clearly now. They were beautiful in a deadly way. Their eyes were intelligent, watching him with focus. Their bodies were tense, ready to spring. In the control room, Commander Brektos made a satisfied sound. He said the human would run now. He said they always ran. Thexlar was watching his monitors with concern. He had his hand on the recall button, ready to pull the predators back if they attacked. But Taeyang did not run. He stood very still and watched the predators. He was breathing slowly, keeping his body language neutral. He was not threatening them. He was not showing fear. He was just present. The lead predator took a step forward, then another, its head tilted to the side, studying him. The other two followed, moving carefully. They should have been circling him by now, cutting off escape routes. That was their training. But instead they seemed confused. The other three predators arrived from a different corridor. Now all six were there, forming a loose circle around him. Taeyang kept breathing, kept staying calm. He did not make eye contact, which could be seen as a challenge. He looked at their bodies instead, reading their posture. They were not in attack position. Their ears were forward but not flat. Their tails were level, not lashing. They were curious, uncertain. One of them made a soft chirping sound, almost like a question. In the control room, silence had fallen. Every eye was on the screens. Thexlar looked confused. He checked his control panel. The predators were responding to commands. They were tracking the target. But they were not doing what they were trained to do. Vera was recording everything, her feathers quivering with excitement. This was not normal behavior. This was something new. Commander Hana Kim leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the console. She was ready to order an extraction. But she was also watching carefully. Something strange was happening. The lead predator took another step toward Taeyang. It was close now, just a few feet away. Close enough to attack, close enough to bite. But instead it lowered its head and sniffed toward him, not aggressive. Investigating, Taeyang remained still. He let the creature approach. He remembered working with wolves at the rehabilitation center. Sometimes they needed to establish that you were not a threat. Sometimes they needed to understand you through scent and observation before they could relax. The predator's nose came closer to his hand. He could feel its warm breath, could see the sharp teeth in its mouth. One bite could do serious damage. But the creature was not biting. It was just smelling. Then something unexpected happened. The predator made a soft sound, almost like a purr. It pressed its head against Taeyang's hand. Not aggressive, affectionate, like a cat seeking attention. Taeyang slowly, very slowly, let his hand rest on the creature's head. The fur was soft and warm. The predator leaned into the touch. The other five moved closer, surrounding him completely now. But they were not threatening. They were circling him like a pack protecting one of their own. In the control room, Commander Brektos made a loud noise of disbelief. He accused the humans of cheating somehow, of using some trick. Thexlar was staring at his screens, his scaled face showing shock. He kept saying this was impossible. This was not how predators behaved. This was not their training. Vera was speaking rapidly into her recording device, documenting everything. She said the predators were showing protective pack behavior. They had bonded with the human. They were treating him like a member of their group. This had never been documented before. Commander Hana Kim allowed herself a small smile. She did not understand what was happening, but she could see Taeyang was safe. More than safe. He had somehow done the impossible. In Corridor Theta 7, Taeyang slowly lowered himself to sit cross-legged on the floor. The predators moved with him, maintaining their circle. One of them lay down beside him, resting its head on his leg. Another pressed against his back. They were protecting him, comforting him, treating him not as prey, not as a threat, but as something precious that needed to be kept safe. And in that moment, something changed on Nexus Station 7. A question arose that no one had asked before. What if humans were not the weak species everyone thought they were? What if their strength was something the galaxy had never learned to recognize? For 10 minutes, Taeyang sat on the floor of Corridor Theta 7, with 6 predators surrounding him like a living shield. He could feel their warmth, hear their breathing, sense their alertness. They had positioned themselves facing outward, watching the corridor in both directions. It was classic protective behavior, the kind he had seen in wolf packs and dog groups on Earth. He spoke to them softly, not words they could understand, but sounds meant to be calming, low and gentle. The predators responded with soft chirps and the occasional purr-like rumble. One of them, a female with a white mark on her chest, kept nuzzling his shoulder as if checking that he was all right. In the control room, the shock was slowly turning into heated discussion. Commander Brektos was demanding an explanation. He insisted that Taeyang must have used some chemical or device to confuse the predators. Humans were known for their technology, he said. This was obviously a trick. Thexlar was shaking his head. He had checked all the scans. There were no chemicals, no devices beyond the standard tracking equipment. The predators were behaving this way entirely on their own. He looked disturbed. These creatures had been bred and trained for generations. Their responses were supposed to be predictable. This was not predictable. Vera was analyzing the data streaming from multiple sensors. She could see the predators' heart rates, body temperature, brain activity. Everything indicated they were calm and content. Not stressed, not confused. They had made a choice and they were comfortable with it. She spoke up, her voice cutting through the arguments. She said the predators were showing attachment behavior. They had bonded with Taeyang in the same way juveniles bond with their pack leaders. But that made no sense. These predators had never met him before. They had been trained to see any moving target as something to pursue. Why would they suddenly decide to protect a human? Commander Hana Kim made a decision. She told Thexlar to send the recall signal. It was time to end the drill and figure out what was happening. Thexlar activated the command. In Corridor Theta 7, a high-pitched tone sounded that should bring the predators back to their handler immediately. The predators heard it. Their ears swiveled toward the sound, but they did not move. They looked at each other, then back at Taeyang. The female with the white mark made a low growling sound, almost like she was refusing the command. Thexlar tried again, increasing the signal strength. The predators shifted uncomfortably. They did not like ignoring their training. But they also did not want to leave Taeyang. It was as if they were torn between their programming and something deeper. Taeyang understood what was happening. He had seen it before with animals who were conflicted. They needed permission. He slowly stood up, speaking gently to the predators. He told them it was okay. They could go. He would be fine. The lead male looked up at him with intelligent eyes. Then, reluctantly, it started walking toward the recall point. The others followed, but they kept looking back at Taeyang. The female with the white mark was the last to leave. She pressed against his leg one more time before finally trotting after her pack. As soon as the predators were secured, Commander Hana Kim sent a team to escort Taeyang back to the control room. When he arrived, everyone stared at him. Some looked amazed. Some looked suspicious. Commander Brektos looked angry. Minho Lee ran up and grabbed his arm, asking if he was hurt. Taeyang shook his head. He was fine. More than fine. He felt exhilarated. He had trusted his instincts and they had been right. But Commander Brektos was not satisfied. He pointed a large claw at Taeyang and demanded to know what trick he had used. What had he done to corrupt the predators? This was sabotage of a security drill. This was unacceptable. Commander Hana Kim stepped between them. She said there would be a full investigation. All the data would be reviewed. But there would be no accusations without evidence. She looked at Taeyang and asked him directly. Had he used anything? Any device, any chemical, anything at all? Taeyang said no. He had done nothing except stay calm and let the predators approach him on their own terms. He had treated them with respect, not as weapons, but as intelligent creatures. That was all. Vera asked if she could run some tests. She wanted to understand what had happened. Taeyang agreed. Over the next hour, he was scanned and examined. His clothes were analyzed. His equipment was checked. They found nothing unusual. He was just a human. No special modifications, no hidden technology. Thexlar asked if he could interview Taeyang about his background. They sat in a quiet office while the Kravax handler asked detailed questions about his work with animals on Earth. He wanted to know everything. How Taeyang approached dangerous creatures, what techniques he used, how he read their body language. As Taeyang explained, Thexlar's expression changed. He began to understand. He said that Kravax juveniles in the wild sometimes approached non-threatening species when they were separated from their packs. They would seek protection from larger predators by staying near creatures that seemed safe. But these cubs had not been wild. They had been raised in captivity, trained from birth. Unless, Thexlar said slowly, the instinct was so deep that training could not completely erase it. Unless something about Taeyang had triggered that ancient response. But what, that question hung in the air. Vera gathered all the scientists on the station for an emergency meeting. She showed them the footage of the drill. She presented the data. She asked for theories. A biologist suggested pheromones. Perhaps humans gave off a scent that predators found calming. But tests showed human pheromones were different from anything the Kravax would naturally respond to. An engineer suggested electromagnetic fields. Perhaps human brain waves affected the predators somehow. But humans and Kravax operated on completely different neural frequencies. Vera listened to all the theories and rejected them one by one. Then she presented her own idea. She brought up information about Earth, about how humans had evolved. She showed images of Earth predators and how humans had learned to live alongside them. Dogs, cats, horses. Humans had a unique ability to form bonds with other species. But more than that, she said, humans had evolved as both predators and protectors. They hunted, yes, but they also cared for their young with an intensity that was rare in the galaxy. They protected the weak. They showed mercy. They could be deadly, but they could also be gentle. To a young predator, Vera theorized, a human might register as something unique. Not prey because humans stood their ground and showed no fear. Not a threat because humans showed no aggression. Instead, humans might appear as what they truly were, apex creatures who had chosen cooperation over domination. The room was silent as everyone absorbed this. Commander Brektos made a dismissive sound. He said this was ridiculous. Humans were weak. Everyone knew this. They had no claws, no armor, no venom. They were slow and fragile. But Vera pointed at the screen showing the footage of Taiyang with the predators. She asked if that looked like weakness. She asked if those predators trained to attack had seen weakness when they looked at the human, or had they seen something else? Something the galaxy had missed? Commander Hana Kim announced that testing would continue. She wanted other humans to interact with the predators under controlled conditions. She wanted to see if this was unique to Taiyang, or if it was something all humans shared. Over the next few days, volunteers stepped forward. Not all humans had the same effect that Taiyang did. Some the predators ignored. Some made the predators nervous. But many humans, especially those who remained calm and confident, saw similar results. The predators would approach them with curiosity, would accept gentle touch, would sometimes settle near them in that same protective circle. The pattern became clear. Humans who showed fear triggered the predator's hunting instincts. Humans who showed aggression made the predators defensive. But humans who showed calm confidence triggered something else entirely, something that looked like trust. Word spread beyond the station. Other stations reported similar observations. Humans working with security animals, humans in zoos with dangerous creatures, humans in diplomatic situations with aggressive species. There was a pattern, and it was impossible to ignore. The galaxy was beginning to realize that humans were not what they had seemed. Not weak prey trying to survive in a dangerous universe, but something stranger and more complex, something that could walk among predators and make them choose peace instead of violence. 3 weeks after the drill, the Galactic Security Council called an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered on the council station to discuss what they were now calling the human paradox. The question was simple but profound. What should they do about humans? Commander Hana Kim traveled to the council station to represent humanity. She brought Taiyang with her along with Vera and Thexlar. Minho Lee came too, bringing all his recordings and data. They prepared their presentation carefully, knowing that the future of human-alien relations might depend on what happened in this meeting. The council chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in rising circles. Each species had their own section, designed for their specific needs. Some seats had water for aquatic species, some had heat lamps for cold-blooded species, some were simply empty space for species that floated or flew. Commander Brektos was there, representing the security interests. He had been vocal about his concerns. He argued that humans posed a security risk. If they could influence trained predators so easily, what else could they do? Could they turn security forces against their own stations? Could they manipulate diplomatic situations? The questions revealed his deep distrust. But there were others who saw opportunity. A Polarian diplomat named Kira spoke about how humans might help with conservation efforts across the galaxy. Many species were struggling with endangered predators who were too dangerous for most beings to approach. Perhaps humans could help rehabilitate these creatures. An elder from the Silicon Collective suggested that humans might be valuable in first contact situations. Many new species were discovered each year. Some were aggressive. Some were fearful. Perhaps humans, with their unique ability to inspire trust, could serve as initial ambassadors. Vera presented her research. She had spent the last 3 weeks studying everything about human evolution. She showed the council images of Earth, a world that should have killed humans 1,000 times over. Deadly predators, poisonous plants, extreme weather, disease. Yet humans had survived not by becoming the biggest or strongest, but by becoming the smartest and most cooperative. She explained how humans had domesticated wolves into dogs, how they had turned aggressive cats into companions, how they had learned to work with horses, birds, even insects. No other species in the galaxy had this ability to such a degree. Humans formed bonds that crossed species barriers. But more importantly, she said humans had developed something unique. They had empathy that extended beyond their own species. They could look at a dangerous predator and see not just a threat, but a living being with needs and feelings. They could be deadly hunters, but they chose mercy when possible. They were apex predators who had learned to be caregivers. Thexlar spoke next. He admitted that he had been wrong about humans. He had thought they were weak. He had dismissed them as prey animals playing at being predators. But he had learned something important. The Kravax cubs had not bonded with Taeyang because they were confused or malfunctioning. They had bonded with him because, at a deep instinctive level, they recognized him as a safe leader. He had reviewed old records of Kravax behavior in the wild. Before his species had started breeding them for security work, wild Kravax sometimes formed unusual partnerships with other species. Young Kravax would seek out calm, confident creatures and follow them for protection. It was ancient behavior, buried deep in their genes. Humans somehow triggered this response. Commander Hana Kim spoke about the practical implications. She said humans did not want special treatment. They did not want to be feared or put on a pedestal. They simply wanted to be recognized for what they were, a species that had value to offer the galactic community, a species that could help bridge gaps between predators and prey, between aggression and cooperation. Then Taeyang spoke. He was nervous addressing the council, but he had something important to say. He talked about his work on Earth, helping injured animals recover. He said that every creature, no matter how dangerous, responded to kindness and respect. The key was understanding their language, reading their signals, giving them space when they needed it and support when they asked for it. He said humans were not special because they were strong or fast or had natural weapons. Humans were special because they had learned to survive by making friends instead of enemies, by building bridges instead of walls, by choosing cooperation over domination whenever possible. He looked directly at Commander Brektos and said that yes, humans could probably influence security predators. But that was not a threat. It was an opportunity to create security forces that protected without being needlessly aggressive, that served without being cruel, that could tell the difference between a real threat and a frightened being who needed help. The council chamber was quiet when he finished. Then, slowly, some members began to signal their approval in their various ways. Some made sounds, some changed colors, some simply raised appendages. Commander Brektos sat in his shell, silent. He was not convinced, but even he could not deny what the data showed. He finally spoke, his voice less hostile than before. He said he wanted safeguards. He wanted oversight. He wanted to ensure that humans were not abusing this ability. Commander Hana Kim agreed. She said humans would welcome oversight. They had nothing to hide. They simply wanted the chance to prove themselves as valuable members of the galactic community. After hours of discussion, the council reached a decision. They would create a new organization called the Galactic Cooperation Initiative. Its purpose would be to study and utilize human abilities in cross-species relations. Humans would work alongside scientists, diplomats, and security forces to develop new approaches to old problems. The 6 Kravax cubs from the original drill would become the first subjects of this program. They would be retired from aggressive security work and instead trained for a new purpose. They would work with Taeyang to develop protocols for non-violent security approaches. They would become ambassadors, showing what was possible when predators and humans worked together. Thexlar volunteered to reform the Kravax training programs. He said it was time to stop treating the cubs as weapons and start treating them as intelligent partners. He asked Taeyang to help him develop new training methods that emphasize cooperation over aggression. Vera received funding to establish a research institute dedicated to studying human-alien bonding. She would work with universities across multiple worlds, including Earth. She was particularly excited about the possibility of training other species in human techniques. Perhaps humans could teach others how to form these cross-species bonds. Min-Ho Lee was offered a position documenting the entire program. His recordings of the original drill had already become famous. Now he would create educational materials showing how humans and aliens could work together more effectively. His work would be used in schools and training centers across the galaxy. As the council session ended, representatives from various species approached the human delegation. Some wanted to apologize for past prejudice. Some wanted to discuss partnership opportunities. Some simply wanted to meet Taeyang and see for themselves this human who had changed everything. That evening, the human delegation celebrated in their quarters. They had done it. They had convinced the galaxy to see humans differently, not as weak prey, not as dangerous wildcards, but as beings with unique value who could help build a better galactic community. Commander Hana Kim raised a glass in a toast. She said this was just the beginning. Humans had been trying to find their place in the galaxy for decades. Now they had found it, not by being the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced, but by being themselves, by showing what humanity had always been good at, making connections, building trust, choosing peace when possible and strength when necessary. Taeyang felt overwhelmed by everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, he had simply been a security officer trying to prove that humans were not weak. Now he was at the center of a movement that might change how the entire galaxy worked together. But he also felt excited. He would get to work with the Kravax cubs again. He would get to develop new ways of training and working with predators. He would get to show the galaxy that strength did not always mean violence, and that the most powerful thing any being could do was choose kindness. As he looked out at the stars from the council station, Taeyang thought about all the species out there, all the different ways of living and thinking, all the potential for conflict and all the potential for friendship. Humans might not be the biggest or strongest species, but they had something valuable to offer. The ability to see beyond differences, to find common ground, to make allies out of strangers and family out of friends. The galaxy was about to learn what humans had always known. That the best way to survive in a dangerous universe was not to become the most dangerous thing in it, but to become the thing that dangerous creatures wanted to protect. 6 months had passed since the security drill that changed everything. Nexus Station 7 looked different now. The harsh metal corridors had been modified to include green spaces and natural elements. The security protocols had been completely rewritten. And in a specially designed habitat on the lower levels, 6 fully grown Kravax predators lived and worked alongside their human partner. Taeyang walked through the habitat entrance, and immediately the predators came running. They were much bigger now, their bodies powerful and graceful. But when they reached him, they acted like excited puppies. The female with the white mark on her chest, whom Taeyang had named Hana in honor of the commander, pressed her head against his chest. The others crowded around, chirping and purring. Today was an important day. A delegation from another station was coming to observe the new training program. If it went well, they would implement similar programs across the galaxy. If it went badly, critics like Commander Brektas would have ammunition to shut everything down. Thexler arrived early to help prepare. Over the past months, he and Taeyang had become close friends. The Kravax handler had transformed, becoming an advocate for treating predators with respect rather than domination. He had even apologized to Taeyang for his initial dismissal of humans. That apology had meant a lot. They ran through the demonstration one more time. The predators would respond to both voice commands and hand signals, but more importantly, they would demonstrate decision-making ability. They would show that they could distinguish between real threats and harmless situations, that they could protect without being needlessly aggressive. The delegation arrived at noon. There were representatives from 12 different species, including Commander Brektos. He had been required to attend by the council, though he made his displeasure clear. He still believed this entire program was dangerous. Commander Hana Kim greeted the delegation and led them to the observation area. Vera was there too, ready to explain the science behind what they were about to see. Min-Ho Lee had his cameras, positioned perfectly, recording everything for the documentary he was making. The demonstration began simply. Taeyang worked with each predator individually, showing how they responded to commands. Sit, stay, come, basic behaviors that any trained animal could do. But then came the interesting part. A volunteer entered, the habitat acting frightened, running and making panicked sounds. This was designed to trigger hunting instincts. In the old training, predators would have been encouraged to chase and corner such a target. But Taeyang's predators did something different. They looked to Taeyang first, checking if this was a real threat. He remained calm, signaling them to observe but not pursue. The predators watched the volunteer but did not chase. When the volunteer tripped and fell, acting injured, the predators approached slowly. Not to attack, but to investigate. The lead, male, sniffed the volunteer, then sat down nearby in a protective position. The volunteer stood up, now acting aggressive, shouting and making threatening gestures. This should have made the predators defensive. But again, they looked to Taeyang. He assessed the situation and determined there was no real danger. He signaled the predators to maintain distance but stay alert. They formed a loose circle around both Taeyang and the volunteer, protective but not aggressive. Finally came the real test. Another volunteer entered, this time carrying what looked like a weapon. The predators tensed immediately. This was a genuine threat. But instead of attacking, they moved into a defensive formation. They put themselves between the armed volunteer and Taeyang. They made warning sounds, low growls that said clearly, "Back away." The armed volunteer continued to advance. Only then did the predators move to intercept. But even now they were controlled. They did not bite or claw. They simply blocked the path using their bodies as shields. They were protecting, not attacking. When Taeyang gave the signal that the threat was over, the predators immediately relaxed. They returned to his side, accepting praise and attention. The transformation from alert guardians to affectionate companions was immediate. In the observation area, several delegates were making excited noises. They had never seen anything like this. Predators who could think, who could assess situations, who could protect without being mindlessly aggressive. Vera explained what they had witnessed. She said the key was treating the predators as intelligent partners rather than weapons. Taeyang had built trust with them. They looked to him for guidance because they knew he would keep them safe while also respecting their nature. This was not domination. This was cooperation. Thexelar added that this approach was actually more effective than the old methods. Predators trained through domination were unpredictable. They might turn on handlers. They might overreact to harmless situations. But predators trained through cooperation were stable and reliable. They made better decisions because they were encouraged to think. One delegate asked the question everyone was thinking. Could other species learn to do this? Or was it unique to humans? Taeyang answered carefully. He said humans had certain advantages because of their evolutionary history. They had learned to work with predators on Earth. But the principles could be taught. It required patience, empathy, and the willingness to see predators as individuals rather than just dangerous animals. Any species could learn these principles if they were willing to try. Thexelar said he was already working with volunteers from other species. Some were showing real promise. It was slower than it was for humans, but it was possible. The key was changing mindsets, moving away from fear and domination toward understanding and partnership. Commander Brektos had remained silent throughout the demonstration. Now he spoke, his voice less harsh than before. He admitted that what he had seen was impressive. He still had concerns about security risks, but he could not deny that these predators were more controlled and effective than traditionally trained ones. He asked direct questions. What happened if Taeyang was injured or unavailable? Would the predators revert to aggression? Taeyang explained that he had been training backup handlers, including Thexelar. The predators could bond with multiple people. It was not about one human. It was about the approach. Took longer than traditional methods. Was it worth the investment? Commander Hana Kim answered this one. She showed data on incidents. Stations using traditionally trained predators had frequent problems, injuries to handlers, overreactions to harmless situations, expensive damages. Stations using the new methods had almost no incidents. The predators were happier, healthier, and more effective. The investment paid for itself. After the demonstration, the delegates stayed to meet the predators personally. Many were nervous at first, but with Taiyang's guidance they learned to approach correctly. Even Commander Brektos, after much hesitation, allowed one of the predators to sniff his shell. The predator showed no aggression, just curiosity. The commander made a sound that might have been approval. That evening, the delegation voted unanimously to expand the program. Taiyang's methods would be implemented on 20 stations within the next year. Funding was approved for training centers on multiple worlds. The Galactic Cooperation Initiative was becoming a reality. Later, Taiyang sat in the habitat with his 6 companions. They had done well today. He was proud of them. But more than that, he was grateful. They had taught him as much as he had taught them. They had shown him that trust could exist between very different beings. That cooperation was stronger than domination. That choosing peace did not mean being weak. Hana, the female with the white mark, rested her head in his lap. The others arranged themselves around him in that familiar protective circle, not because they had been trained to, but because they wanted to. Because this human had shown them kindness when the galaxy had treated them as weapons. Because he had seen them as individuals with thoughts and feelings. Commander Hana Kim entered the habitat. She often visited in the evenings to see how things were going. She sat down next to Taiyang, and immediately 2 of the predators moved to include her in their circle. She smiled and scratched one behind the ears. She told Taiyang that Earth had contacted her. They wanted him to come home and help establish training programs there. They wanted to learn from what he had accomplished. He asked if she would be disappointed if he went. She laughed and said she would be disappointed if he stayed. This work was too important to be limited to one station. But, she said, he should know that he would always have a place here. Nexus Station 7 was his home as much as Earth. He had changed this station. He had changed how species interacted. He had proven that humans were not weak prey, but something much more valuable. Builders of bridges, makers of peace, creatures who could walk among predators and inspire them to be better. Taiyang thought about his journey. 6 months ago, he had just wanted to prove that humans were not weak. He had stepped into a corridor, with 6 trained predators not knowing what would happen. Now those predators were his family. Now the galaxy was learning that strength came in many forms, and now he had the chance to teach others what he had learned. He looked around at the predators who had chosen to trust him, at Commander Hana Kim, who had believed in him when others doubted, at the cameras where Minho Lee was probably still recording D.